Thanks everyone for coming back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, confidence at the moment, obviously things in the economy aren't quite as bad as they were during April, of course, not back to normal either, but businesses are certainly starting to feel a bit more confident about things, it seems.
Yeah, after that initial hit to confidence through April and May, we have seen it gradually rebounding over the last few months, and that's continued into September. So now confidence levels back at their highest since February, so since before the pandemic really started to become a feature of the New Zealand economic landscape. And that's repeated, right across the board when you look at most of the indicators coming through. Still at sort of well below average levels, and I guess what you'd term recessionary levels, but nowhere near the sort of dire responses that we were getting a few months ago.
Which is quite incredible in a sense. We've seen that businesses are certainly feeling the hit. We've seen that coming through in the numbers, and obviously this crisis is far and away worse in terms of its immediate impacts than something like the GFC, but those numbers are hovering around sort of what we did see during the 08-09 sort of period. So it is quite incredible. I mean, what's happening at a sector by sector level? Agri, of course, going pretty well. Retail not feeling quite as much love. Construction, though, a bit of a change coming through there in some of the recent numbers.
Yes, some strength returning to some of those construction figures, both the residential and probably even more so the commercial construction responses there have picked back up. Again, still not necessarily exceptional, but they are one of the sort of brighter areas or less dim areas, I suppose you could say, coming through in the figures. You also mentioned the retail, and certainly one of the features of the latest month's data was the fact that services responses in terms of how they expect their own activity to go didn't, it tanked a little bit in April, not in April, rather in August, as a result of the renewed lockdown, I think, in Auckland coming through and the numbers there, but hasn't really recovered into September. And I think that is a reflection probably just of the hospitality and sort of tourism, retail related stuff where, they are at the mercy of those lockdowns and those restricted conditions. And that's at odds with some of the other areas such as manufacturing, agriculture and construction where, the conditions and expectations have been, generally speaking, on the improve.
And certainly, I think what we're seeing quite clearly coming through there is that businesses realise that things are still quite uncertain, not too keen to make too many big decisions, but that feeling of confidence is not that things are really dire and doom and gloom. They're not better, they're not good by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a bit of improvement in terms of that feeling that things have certainly improved from where they have been, even though we haven't sort of made it through to better or normal conditions yet. And that's playing out pretty similarly, in fact, for the likes of consumers, isn't it? Households are, again, not thinking that things are all, rosy yet, but also have lifted from some very low levels earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, consumer confidence not hit anywhere near as much in this sort of through that lockdown period as we saw on business confidence. But yeah, holding fairly steady over the last 2 or 3 months on the consumer side and, not too far below the sort of long-term averages that we'd expect. I think what was one of the interesting points in the latest consumer confidence numbers from ANZ was that households' assessment of their own financial situation compared with a year ago, the response to that question was actually at its weakest since 2013. And so there are just signs that maybe some of those financial stresses are starting to show through in household budgets. It's still well above GFC levels. And indeed, we didn't see the worst of it following the GFC in response to that question until about 2011. So there could be quite a long tail or a sort of a longer term impact to come through in consumer confidence. I mean, that's one area we'll really need to keep watching over the next 12 months or so as some of those labour market impacts start to play out more fully.
Totally. And look, again, that uncertainty does persist. We're not quite sure of where that direction of travel will take us. So we'll keep a watching brief on it and see where things trend. Thanks so much, Gareth. Always great to chat. And we'll catch you and everyone on the next edition of Econ Talks.